Thanks everyone for joining us for tonight's event. My name's Kevin. I'm one of the event hosts here at Powell's Books in Portland. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. And if you don't already do so, you can follow us on our social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. Tonight, we're excited to welcome Louis Bayard in conversation with Julia Claiborne Johnson. Louis is the author of The Pale Blue Eye, The Black Tower, and many other books. His newest is Jackie and Me, a brilliantly wrought, witty, and sensitive novel about the young Jacqueline Bouvier before she became Jackie O, and about a marriage that almost never happened. In the spring of 1951, Jacqueline is a debutante, working as the inquiring photographer for the Washington Times-Herald. She meets Jack Kennedy, a charming congressman from a notorious and powerful family, at a party in Washington, D.C. Young, rebellious, and eager to break free from her mother, Jackie is drawn to the elusive young politician, and soon she and Jack are bantering over secret dinner dates and phone calls. Jack, busy with house duties and Senate campaigning, as well as his other now well-known extracurricular activities, convinces his best friend and fixer, Lem Billings, to court Jackie on his behalf. Only gradually does Jackie begin to realize that she is being groomed to be the perfect political wife, whether Jack is interested in settling down or not. Sharply written and with witty appearances by members of the extended Kennedy clan, this is Jackie as never before seen in the story about love, sacrifice, friendship, and betrayal. Bayard will be joined in conversation by Julia Claiborne Johnson, author of the best-selling Be Frank With Me and her latest Better Luck Next Time. This evening's event includes an audience Q&A as well. Please use the Q&A button that you can see at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question at any time. And if someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, you can even upvote that particular question. Perhaps most importantly, please support Louis and Powell's by purchasing copies of Jackie and Me from us. Links to buy that book, these other books, and Julia's books will be shared in the chat a couple of times this evening. Louis, Julia, we're so happy to host you tonight. Thanks a lot for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
So I'm going to start by telling a story about how I ended up here tonight because, oh, there goes an airplane. Louis, okay, here's what happened. Betsy Glick, who is Louis's editor, I knew when I was young in New York City. And so she wrote me last summer when your book was in manuscript pages. Was that when it was?
Probably.
It was like hot off of your typewriter or your computer. And
My typewriter, yeah. My Smith Corona typewriter, yeah.
So she said, would you blurb this book for me? And I was like, oh, because, blurbing books is a lot of work, and you don't always love the books, and, and you hate to say no, but you're also nervous about saying yes. So I was like, fine, just send it to me. I'll look at it. And so I looked at it, and I was enraptured from the first page, and I love it so much. It's my favorite book that I read last year in manuscript pages. And then I reread it a couple of weeks ago to get ready for this. And it's my favorite book that I read this year also. So I said to Louis, okay, so here's what happened. I was playing the long game 25 years ago when I became friends with Betsy. It was basically to get to you.
Right.
So,
right. That was genius. That was a genius move, Julia.
Yeah.
It was genius.
So, anyway,
really genius.
but it's such a fun and beautifully written book, and it's been very well received. It's like, oh wait, I wrote down what people said. Where did I write?
Oh yeah, it's got to be in there.
People magazine said absolutely irresistible. The book and the man I have found. New York Times, stylish and sexy. It's like the Elizabeth Egan picked it for the group text, which is like what the books that the New York Times recommends for book clubs, because it's so great and wonderful, and I want everybody to read it. So, and in that vein, Louis, would you read a little bit from it for us? So
okay. Yes. Because you're you, Julia, because you're who you are.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a totally different part than I usually read. I'm going to read the very beginning of the book, just to kind of get people in the mood, right? And then we can go from there.
And you know what's great about this? I'm very excited that you're doing this, is because I'm not going to spoil the end, but like everything, it comes together so perfectly. And the beginning is part of that perfection. When you get to the end, you're like, oh. So anyway, yes, please.
All right, well, thank you. Okay, here we go. So this is the very beginning. I'm not going to do any kind of explanatory stuff in advance. I'm just going to go from there. If in fact my computer will just suffice. Come on now, come on, work with me. Here we go. This is the beginning of Jackie. There's an Oscar Wilde thing, but we don't need to worry about that. Of all the places, the East Village, miles from the Upper East Side, and there she was sauntering down Avenue A in a linen skirt and black blouse, the Nina Ricci sunglasses clamped on like aviator's goggles, the carriage nowhere more equestrian than when she stepped over the snoring, splayed drag queen. Was she coming or going? Catching a flick at the Hollywood Theater or meeting a friend at Old Buenos Aires? There was no way of asking with the gentleman thug from the Secret Service following 10 feet behind. I could have damned the torpedoes, I suppose, but I'm embarrassed to say that at the sight of her, I did what every other New Yorker does, stopped and gawked, as if she were some golden hind, yes, trotting out of the glade. Oh gosh. Imagine my frustration. Some 6 years have passed since I last gazed on her, I mean, and not her immaculate Christmas cards. So it was startling to have the universe, after all this time, grant me such a clear angle on her, and in the next breath, withdraw it. 1 second, I mean, she was coming straight at me. The next, she was turning the corner at E6, her shoulder bag swinging after her. Now, it's certainly possible that before she made the turn, she caught sight of me. It's also possible that even if she saw me, and this is the scenario that haunts me a little, a few hours after our crossing, she didn't know me. I bring that up because I don't cut the same figure I used to. Since we last laid eyes on each other, I've become a stouter specimen, slower. The lungs whistle, the hair's longer. I've watched friends of long standing pass me in the street without a second glance. In my mind now, I imagine myself somehow slipping past the Secret Service goon and stealing up to that sunglassed figure and murmuring in her ear, "It's Lem," I would say. And Jackie, having failed until now to connect the spectacle before her with the man she used to know, would hear my voice, climbing always higher than I mean it to, and would call up every inch of her breeding and say something like, "How perfectly lovely to see you." The thing is, it would have been lovely. No bean counting. God, I'm losing my stretch here. Hold on a second. I'll get there.
Because I'm about to start crying, so I can just.
No bean counting. I'm sorry about. Sorry about all the time she could have seen me. Just the two of us leaning in like old conspirators. The years laughed away. Do you remember? I'd say listening to Margaret Truman and getting stuck on the Ferris wheel, watching J. Edgar Hoover eat, such a pure back and forth that the bodyguard would instantly relax his grip on the hip holster and let us carry on untroubled down East 6th. Hell, all the way back uptown. That's how much catching up we'd have had to do, Jackie and me. And really, if I had gone to all the trouble of approaching her, if I had risked the full hail of Secret Service bullets, I wouldn't have squandered the moment by asking her something as banal as, "How are you?" I mean, there are whole news organizations dedicated to exploring that question. Photographers have been legally enjoined from pressing it too hard. Maybe all I would have said was, "I'm sorry." So that is the very, very opening sequence of Jackie and me. And I need to talk about the me. Well, let me talk first about the Jackie briefly.
Mm-hmm.
So the Jackie that we're meeting in this book is not the Jackie that you probably know. This is not the First Lady. This is not the First Lady widow. This is not the Greek tycoon's wife. This is not the paparazzi magnates familiar to so many generations of tabloid readers like me. This is not the book editor that your pal Steve read about in his book, The Editor. Not even the style icon. This is just the Jackie before she became all those Jackies. And she is a working a working girl, as they used to say, working girl, back in the day, working as an inquiring camera girl for the Washington Times-Herald, and she's taking these pictures, man on street interviews, and doing the interviews and developing the photographs and putting out a column 6 days a week. So it was a real job, not a Pulitzer gig, but a real job, and a sign that she had ideas beyond becoming, or she said in her high school yearbook, Miss Porter's School for Girls yearbook, anything but a housewife, is what she said. But, so let's talk about the me briefly. So the me is a guy named Lem Billings, who was Jack Kennedy's best friend from high school through the end of life, through the end of Jack's life. And the guy who is uniquely positioned to see this courtship between Jack and Jackie, between this dilettante career girl and this attractive bachelor congressman, come to a kind of fruition, and to be part of that. He didn't have just a ringside seat. He was actually a fixer, a matchmaker on his own part. So has this unique angle on it, but he's talking about it from the perspective of 1981, where that passage that I first read stems from. And so he has this unique angle on this, and maybe some unfinished business to work out over the course of this book.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like it is a very amusing book also, but it's also super heartbreaking. And the thing that really hooked me, I think, in the beginning is how I was like, oh my God, they're like sort of the same outsider, because Lem is like fancy people with no money and Jackie's fancy people with no money. And they sort of bond over it. And they're like, not like silly socialites, like they have a real bond. And I think it's so beautiful. And really, it's like the book is about Lem and Jackie, what I'm saying? So maybe you understood that while you were writing it, but what I mean?
It was a bit of a dance, actually, writing the book, figuring out how much weight do we give Lem, how much do we give Jackie, and trying to give them equal weight, because I think they're equally interesting people. But of course, Jackie is the person that people come for. So you hope they'll just stick around for Lem, because I think he's equally interesting in his own way.
Oh my gosh, I was like obsessed. I was like, wait a minute, is this a real guy? So I like got my phone out and I was looking it up and I was like, oh, he's real, like he existed. Tell us how you came across this, because I find this fascinating as well.
Yeah, I came across this about 4 years ago. I'd never heard the name Lem Billings before, and I received an issue of my college alumni weekly, which is bafflingly a bi-weekly. They still haven't fixed the name of this. And on the cover of this magazine was a picture of these two young collegiates from the 1930s, both very attractive, these very attractive young men, kind of in these very mock flirtatious Mae West kind of poses, kind of.
There went Jackie.
Jackie went down. Oh no. Will we remember her? Wait,
we're gonna do this the whole time. How about that?
We're gonna do this. Okay, we're gonna bring her back. All right, just in case anybody's forgotten what this whole show is about.
Exactly.
I can't believe I did that to her after all we've been through together.
You were overwhelmed by enthusiasm.
I was trying to, because I don't have the picture. So these two 1930s undergraduates kind of doing the Mae West kind of hip to the camera thing. And I realized that the smaller of the two men was John F. Kennedy Jr., like this very young liminal version of him before he became.
Isn't he? Is he Junior?
What?
John F. Kennedy?
Joe was the father, so it's just John, no Junior.
His son is Junior. You were confusing me. My brain is very small.
Sorry. So John F. Kennedy. I apologize if I said Junior. So yes, this is just John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the one we all know. Except he didn't look like him at all. And then there's this taller guy next to him, and his name was Kirk Lemoyne Billings, and he just had this goofy grin and this juicy quality, and he just looked like you could almost hear him laughing through the frame of this long ago photograph. So that was my first introduction to him. His full name was Kirk Lemoyne Billings. They first met together at Choate, where they went to high school. They both hated Choate. That was one of the things that bonded them together. And then they just stayed best pals through the rest of their lives. If we're looking at Camelot, Lem was the court jester.
See, I love a court jester. You'll be shocked to hear.
Right. Yeah, we all love our court jesters. We all love our court jesters, and that was what Lem did. He was not a politico. He was not, he was not in the smoke-filled rooms. He was just the guy keeping Jack happy, playing backgammon, listening, cracking jokes, doing what so many presidents have needed to do. Some guy just to call up and shoot the shit with. And that's what he did. And he was very much so when when Jack needed him to do anything, whether it was work on his campaign or travel to Europe after college or do whatever, Lem was there. And when Jack needed somebody to befriend and cultivate this young, attractive Catholic girl named Jackie Bouvier, he was there for that too. And that's how they come to be together, Jackie and Lem. And as you say, they had a lot in common together. They were both these outliers. They'd grown up amongst great wealth without having any of their own. They were both these aesthetes and Europhiles who cared a lot more about art and culture than politics or touch football. And they both loved this one guy, perhaps more than they should have.
Yes, exactly. And that's fascinating to me too, because it's sort of like Jack is sort of being who Lem wants to be, and Jackie is also being who Lem wants to be. So it's just so fascinating to me. I couldn't get enough of it. So
yeah, but, it's a love triangle, just in a slightly different direction. But I know triangles are intrinsically interesting. They're interesting because they're never equal. There's always somebody's not getting enough in that triangle, and somebody's getting too much.
Yeah, somebody's always the hypotenuse.
So. Well, it's the right triangle. That's all right. Okay. A squared plus B squared equals it's so long ago. It's so long ago. But yes, somebody's not getting enough, and in this case, I think Lem and Jackie are both not getting enough, and Jack's getting everything. So
yeah. So it's super crazy. And I had not realized until I read your book that Jackie was not going to get any, because her mother, after she was married to the wastrel who was Jackie's father, then married a super rich guy, but then she wasn't going to get anything when he shuffled off the coil. She was just on her own, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize it was really so important for her. It wasn't really for society. And do you remember when Jack died and she married Aristotle Onassis? It was like she needed his money to feel safe. And that was like a thing that went through her life, which I hadn't realized had been a factor earlier on.
All along, because she didn't have any in on the Auchincloss money. Her stepfather was the Standard Oil heir, Hugh Auchincloss, but she did not stand to inherit from that. So she had to find her own way. And so that was partly why she was doing the career girl thing, but at the same time, she's also looking out for maybe there's somebody else. So she's torn in a lot of directions, as I think a young, ambitious woman would have been in the 1950s in America.
When I was reading this, I kept looking up pictures of everybody, because I was like, her mother sounds like a battle axe, and then her mother looks like a battle axe. So that was also quite entertaining. So keep your phone handy so you can look up pictures of all the people.
Of Janet Auchincloss,
They all seem so alive to me. Like, it was amazing. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I really liked your book. But so did you feel weird about, because there's so many Jackie books out there.
Yeah.
Was that something that you were familiar with? Did you think about it at all? I mean, where did you stand on that?
No, I think honestly, being an agnostic about the Kennedys was helpful. I didn't actually know a lot about them other than the basic stuff. I had read your friend Steve's book, The Editor, which I loved.
Steve wrote.
And I could read that because that came out later in her life, and that wasn't conflicting. But now I in a weird way, it helped that I didn't know a lot about the Kennedys, that I didn't have an axe to grind about them one way or another. So I just kind of dug in, and I just looked for the stuff that I didn't know. So hoping that would be the true of other people as well. But it's always.
Now, when you did your research, did you go places? Like, did you go to the house where she used to live, the Marywood, or did you?
Marywood. I tried to get to, but it's hard. You can't get there. I drove up. Just about Marywood is, I should say, is the estate, the baronial estate that she lived on with her stepfather and mother.
Mother, yes.
Yeah, it's on it's north of McLean, Virginia. It's right off the Potomac. It's supposed to be beautiful, but you can't actually get there.
Is
But
it
you drive
somebody's house?
around. Sorry, what?
Does some rich person live there now?
It's privately owned. Yeah, it's
Okay.
privately owned.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who owns it now. I want to say Steve Jobs owned it at one point, but I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, it's still there, but you're just trying to get a piece. But here's the thing: I didn't get to Hyannisport, and I was writing this at the height of COVID, so there wasn't a lot of traveling to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do it the way I usually do, is through books and research. And I was touched because somebody who knew Lem as an undergraduate in college, her name is Lois. I won't say her last name, but she knew all those guys. She knew Bobby Jr. She knew them all, and she thought I'd really gotten both Lem and Hyannisport, where I've never been.
Oh,
Yeah. So
real?
yeah, it's just I used to take care to set books in places where I wanted to travel to. So I would set books in London or Paris or something like that.
That's very smart.
Yeah,
Very
yeah, right. You write it off. You write it off, Julia.
But
Write
yeah.
that shit off. Yes, you do. So in this case, I would have liked to travel, but it was just harder to do.
Yeah.
And I've come to the point where I realized you just figure your way in, and you do the research and try to get there.
Did you go to the library during it? Was the library closed too? Because you go to
The Library of Congress, which is 6 blocks from my house, as an invaluable resource, was also closed through a lot of this. So I was going online. I was buying books for cheap.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and I was just trying to figure out stuff where I could, and as I think we all were, we were just trying to make it happen one way or another. But my normal research options were definitely shut down. And it was an interesting challenge, but also reinforced to me that what I traffic in is lost worlds. And that's true even of 1951, Washington, D.C. I can't tell you how many different accounts there are of Jack and Jackie and how they first met and who was there when they first met. You'd think that because all this happened within living memory, that there would be some engraved some engraved tablet about how this all played out. But in fact, there are multiple accounts, all disagreeing with other. There's a place in DC, I don't know if any people are from DC, called Marvin's. Is it Marvin's? They claim that Jack proposed to Jackie in this place. I think they've even isolated the booth where it happened in Georgetown. Marvin, is it Martin's Tavern?
Julie Friedman knows everything. So
Julie, thank you. Martin's Tavern. So they claim that's, but in fact, when you look at the research, it happened almost certainly over in a transatlantic phone call when Jackie was covering the Queen Elizabeth's coronation in London. But again, there's so many different accounts, and you think because it happened within living memory, everyone will agree, and it doesn't. So that just underscores my belief that history is a fiction, and that's why what I do is just part of that same continuum. I'm not inventing that much. I'm just kind of rolling with what's there.
This is a total non sequitur, but when I was a magazine writer, I went to this fancy inn in Ojai, and I'm totally drawing a blank about it, but it's where Jack and Jackie went on their honeymoon. And they let me see the honeymoon suite. And I was so excited because as somebody who grew up on a farm milking cows, I was like, this is where Jack and Jackie went on their honeymoon. And I'm standing right here. So,
and what was it like?
It was beautiful. Oh my God, what is that place called? It's in Santa Barbara. Oh my God. And when I signed in, the sign-in book was there, and I signed my name in, and right above my name, Brad Pitt. Because we hang out in places. So this was a long time ago. But anyway, because he and I broke up after that. So
you and Brad?
And Brad. It was too hot.
I'm sorry that didn't work out. You were just from different worlds.
We're from different worlds, So but anyway, but it's fascinating. Like you're living right in the white hot center where and you teach at George Washington, which is where Jackie graduated from.
Absolutely. Every time I go to class, I see the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis building that was named in her honor. And yes, she had a fascinating collegiate career. She spent 2 years at Vassar, a year at the Sorbonne, and then she finished at George Washington University, which was then a pretty, not not terribly glamorous commuter college. I think she just needed to get her degree at that point so that then she could move on. But then she got this thing called the Prix de Paris, which is a very prestigious Vogue magazine scholarship. Joan Didion got it about 10 years afterwards.
Mhm.
Very prestigious, very competitive. And then she kind of crapped out of that after a week, and then wound up talking her way into this Inquiring Camera Girl gig. So she had this ambition, but she also had this, as I said, this trend of moving away from ambition toward matrimony. And I think that just made her emblematic of her era, because young women of a certain class were supposed to find suitable husbands. We're not too far from Jane Austen in that sense. And so that's, in essence, she's resisting that, but she's also giving into it.
Well, her mother was not very, based on your book, her mother was not hugely supportive of her either. So doing anything but marrying. And that had to give her some self-doubt. I mean, I was shocked when she backed out of that Prix de Paris. I was like, what is happening?
Right? Isn't that the best gig? You get to cover the Paris fashion shows. Oh my gosh, yeah. In fact, there's a whole chapter devoted to figuring out why that happened, because I was fascinated as a historical novelist. Why did she do that? That was a great gig. She would have gone to Paris in the spring. So I came up with some solutions about basically coming down to things like New York and her mother and all these other things that are going on at the time. But yeah, she's an enigma from the very beginning, which is interesting. The mystery doesn't just kind of gather around her when she becomes a public figure. She's already mysterious right from the start. Yeah,
the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting, because I was never like, I always felt fine about Jackie up until I read this book, and then I was like, now I awake at night and think, well, like I'm like really into it now, and I think you like lit a fire under me to like, I look up pictures of things, I think about it. I'm telling you, it was a great job. So
thank you. She's enduringly interesting, and I still ponder why that is. Why are we so interested in her? I think it is because of that mystery. It's because there's this thing.
There's no knowing her.
Yeah, you look at pictures of her, there's something she's not telling you. It's the same as the great movie stars, the Greta Garbos, right? There's something
the ones that people get upset.
There's something they're not telling you, and you just lean in and you want to wait. What are you not telling me? What do I not?
I won't tell anybody. I promise.
Exactly. We're friends. It's just me and Brad Pitt and a few other.
Yeah, exactly. But Lem kind of felt that way too. Like he felt like he was getting so close to her, and he tells her a couple of times that he really loves her, and I don't want to give away stuff, but like he feels this real like connection to her, even him,
Yeah. Well, they spend a summer of Sundays together in Washington, D.C. circa 1951, which is a strange place. I always loved John Kennedy's quote about the D.C. Being a city of northern charm and southern efficiency. And I think that's that's kind of where we are in this place.
That's hilarious.
It's a very southern city, kind of not a lot going on. There's no Kennedy Center to begin with. Let's start there. And everything is just it's very low culture. But they're hanging out together and spending together, and they run into J. Edgar Hoover, as I said earlier, and they do all these things, but it's just the act of being together that draws them together. And at some point in the book, and this is kind of the main arc of the book in some ways, is that Lem is supposed to tell Jackie what she has in store for her when she becomes Mrs. Kennedy, i.e., she's about to marry a confirmed bachelor who is not going to stop being a bachelor just because he's walked down the aisle. He's ready to do exactly what his father did, Joe Sr., and carry on and do what he knows how to do. And so it's up to Lem to tell Jackie that this is what she has in store. And this actually happened in historical reality. He talked about it in an interview. He said, that this was his task. So the book goes in a slightly different place than history goes. In historical record, he does what he's supposed to do, and Jackie doubles down and says, I'm going to make it happen. But in the book, they zig in a slightly different direction. And the book, in fact, is all about alternative destinies, alternative path, the road's not taken, that kind of thing, parallel realities. So it's a book of alternative history as much as anything.
Yeah, and that's what part of what for me, that's part of what's so heartbreaking because you're like, oh, like if you'd zigged instead of zagged,
Right. I think we all have those moments in our lives where we think about that. Gosh, if I'd zigged there instead of zagged,
Mhm.
maybe things would have been completely different, or maybe anything could have happened at that moment. I think we all have those moments. I can think of a couple moments in my life where,
Mhm.
gosh, if that hadn't happened, then I would have gone there, and everything
Oh,
would have been
everything
different.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Like if she hadn't gone to that party, would they have
yeah.
met later?
Right. They met. Yeah. Would they have met later? Perhaps. Again, there are stories of them meeting in other venues and through other means. So
Mhm.
it's hard to say, but yeah, it definitely would have been a very different experience if they hadn't met at that party. And if she hadn't been where she was and where he was already getting pressure at this point to marry, because his father said, if you're going to be president, that was the plan,
Life.
you
Mhm.
got to have a wife. And you think about it, we still expect our presidents to be married. We still expect them to have
Several
spouses.
times.
It's weird. It's weird if they don't have spouses. What's going on? We had one bachelor president, James Buchanan, about whom we can speculate as long as we need. But it's just we expect our presidents to be married, and if they're not, that's just fucking weird. What's going on
Yeah.
here?
And if
Yeah.
Jackie hadn't been Catholic, she wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have
No.
worked.
Yeah. She needed to be
Everything.
Catholic. That was very key. That
And
was
there
very
weren't
key.
that many society girls who were Catholic, I think. I mean,
Correct.
I don't know. I'm not amazingly on the farm. We did not have like one of those blue book kind of things to tell you.
You weren't in the social register.
Yeah.
Wait, what's up with
I
that?
know. One of my friends in college had a debutante party and she invited me to. I said, "What's a debutante party?" I had no idea. I'd never heard of such a thing. So,
Yeah, I
but
was
now,
invited to these things. Yeah, as a kid, I had no idea what they were. So
oh
we
my
never went.
gosh. So now
Yeah,
you've written 10 books, which just blows my mind. You were
right.
basically 12 when you wrote the first one. And
Well, I had James Patterson's collaborators work with me on all of those books,
yeah,
because
exactly.
we
You said,
work. James and I work together.
yeah,
We
yeah,
work together.
yeah.
Yeah.
Synergy. But is that I apologize that I don't know the answer to this question, or maybe I'm just pretending I don't know. Are they all historical fiction, or are they like
All but two. All but
uh-huh.
two are historical fiction. Now, so I wrote a couple of sort of contemporary romantic comedies with an independent publisher. And then I wrote this book called Mr. Timothy, it was my desire, because I loved Dickens growing up.
Oh, and it's about Tiny Tim.
About Tiny Tim. Yes, it was about Tiny Tim. So I wanted to write this book I wanted to do basically bad things to Tiny Tim, because I never could stand him as a character. I wanted to kind of visit harm on Tiny Tim. And the only way I could do that was like figure out, what would have been like to live in that era. And I went with great trepidation into that. It's like, seems like a lot of work. But again, I have a Library of Congress 6 blocks down the street. And once I got in, it's like, oh, this is kind of fun. And it's that same challenge I was talking about, of reanimating these lost worlds and trying to make them come alive. And how do you do that? You don't go, Victorian London isn't there anymore. 1818 Paris isn't there anymore. 1830 West Point isn't there. They're gone. So you go into the stacks and you try to find them that way. And it's a great challenge.
No, it's fascinating because we were, Lewis and I were talking yesterday, because the moving pictures, there's one coming out on one of his books that's
The
called
moving pictures.
yeah, it's called A Pale Blue Eye. And so I was like, oh, I haven't read that one. So I started reading it last night.
I hear they have sound. I hear they have sound, these moving pictures.
They do. The talkies. So, but I was reading that. I was like, this is fabulous. I was very excited about that one too. So apparently I'm going to have, like, a week from now, I will have read every book you've ever written. But
is that true?
no, but
no, it's nowhere. It's not even near true. You'll have read two, but keep going.
Yeah, but so but I was like thinking, yeah, this is so cool, because they're like things, like it almost seems like I wrote a novel that was a historical novel, which I found out when they said, you've written a historical novel. I had no idea. So, but
it's like when someone said I wrote a mystery. It's like, I did. Oh,
I did.
okay.
What? But it gives you something to hang it on, which I found very helpful. And was that the case for you? Is it easier to do the historical fiction stuff?
I thought of it initially as a kind of accident. I just kind of wandered in there because of Tiny Tim, because of Dickens. Now I see it as Providence, because it just feels like the place I'm most comfortable with. When I try to imagine books about modern day subjects, I even worked with an idea of a future dystopian thing. My son keeps telling me, you need to get away from history. It's not, you're not selling books that way. So I was trying to kind of, and I just, every time I tried it, I take up that idea, I think, oh, but wait a minute, what about that thing that happened then when that thing happened? So that tells me that this is just my nature to kind of skedaddle back into time. And these days, it's so much easier to try to figure out the past than the present. I find the present just a complete mare's nest. I can't even begin to.
Well, the other thing too is what has really made writing fiction hard is cell phones, because like you can't have the missed connections. I was like, the right has to happen before a cell phone, because otherwise, how do they?
I think it makes it easier, because nowadays it's like, well, why would you do this? Because they could have done that. They could have done. There's so many technological alternatives or options that they have in a moment. In 19th century, you know, or even 1950, yeah.
If Romeo and Juliet had had cell phones, they would both have lived. And then they would have gotten so bored with each other. They would have gotten married.
Then they would have been sexting with Tybalt and
exactly.
I know. Yeah.
So anyway, what was your favorite part about the whole Jackie and the Lem experience? Like, was there a part that really just you thought about a lot and you're like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever?
Well, for me, it was and this is also a very Jane Austen moment in my mind, where the parents come together to arrange the wedding. So you have the Auchinclosses, you have Hugh and Janet Auchincloss, the very old money, very Newport, and then you have Joe and Rose Kennedy, who are Arraviste, and Joe is the one who basically very quietly takes over this whole negotiation in a way that I really appreciated.
It was hilarious. That was my favorite scene, I think, because it was just so funny, because just like the awkwardness of it. You know?
Yes, and you have new money versus old money, and new money is going to win every damn time. They
have so much of it. So
yes, exactly. That's the thing. At one point, Jackie says, well, you know, so and so, you know, you can't have a happy marriage if there's not money is not going to fix an unhappy marriage. I'm not quoting from memory. And Joe, her soon-to-be father-in-law, says that's because there's not enough money. In his mind, if there's enough money, then everything will be fine. You know, it doesn't matter if you hate your wife or she hates you. She can go to Paris for a couple months and hang out at fashion shows, and it's just, if you have enough money, anything is possible in Joe Kennedy's world.
Yeah, no, it's fun. The other thing I like thinking about is how, like, if Joe Jr. had lived, how different Jack's.
Oh yeah, that's a great question, because Joe Jr. was supposed to be, he was the heir apparent. He was going to be the next president. He was going to be, and Jack, his whole personality was shaped by being the number 2 son, who was not as big, and who was and of course, it was ill, constantly chronically ill, with something they couldn't even diagnose at first. No, Joe Jr. was supposed to take the whole thing over. So when Joe Jr. died, suddenly it was like, oh, we have to channel all this energy, all this ambition, all this drive into this number 2 kid who's sardonic and frequently ill and spends a lot of time in hospitals and likes chasing girls, reads books.
Oh my God.
Because of all the time he spent in hospital beds, he became this serious reader, major history buff. So it was a very interesting wrench in the Kennedy dynamic. But they all went with it. Jack went with it too, and it became about, you know, achieving really Joe's ambition, because Joe really was the one who wanted to be president. Joe Sr.
died in the war, right? Wasn't he a pilot or something? And
Joe Jr. died in the war. Yeah. Joe Sr. was the U.S. ambassador to Britain, and basically trashed his own reputation because he was a Nazi sympathizer. Really, he didn't think that Britain should go to war, and you know, obviously, the way things played out, that was not a popular.
He didn't call that one right.
He didn't call that one right, so he messed that one up.
Not enough money to throw at that to make it okay. So
yeah. So, but the interesting thing is, Joe, during this whole Jack's ascendancy, is very much behind the scenes, because he knows he's unpopular, so he's working very much behind the scenes, but lubricating everything with lots and lots of money and making things happen. And it worked out. And then tragically, just a couple of years after Jack was elected president, he had a stroke and wound up being sort of an
Oh,
invalid for the last 10
right.
years. 10
Oh,
years of his
yeah, I've
life.
seen
Yeah.
pictures of him in
Yeah.
the wheelchair. He, had an affair with Gloria Swanson.
Gloria Swanson,
Talked
yeah,
about-
that comes up in the book.
And their
Yeah.
love nest, where he had an apartment with her, is like walking distance from my house. So
Oh, wow.
Because I looked up, there's this very beautiful building close to me. I was like, I love this building. I'm going to Google it. And I Googled it. I was like, that's where he had his love nest. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, that's crazy.
And
So-
also in Hyannisport, they did a little love nesting in there as well. And he kind of killed Gloria's career. Really, he kind of put her into that Queen Kelly thing with Eric von Stroheim and did a nice job of mangling her career. Thank God for Sunset Boulevard. It came along 20 years later. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I'm sorry I had to have a Sunset Boulevard.
Me too. It's basically my favorite movie.
Oh my God.
When
When you come to visit me, we'll have to, because all that's like the house which was Gloria Swanson's house in the movie, is also walking distance from my house. And when they made that movie, the way they paid for the set location was to build the pool that Jack Geddes. That's not his name.
Oh no, William Holden. William Holden.
But I can't remember his character's name, where he floats in. They built that.
Joe. Yeah.
And they tore it down
Joe.
soon thereafter and built an office building there. So
Yeah. So much history, so much stuff going on.
I know, exactly. Well, I'm glad you wrote this book. I wonder if anybody wants to ask questions, because we've just been gabbing and gabbing.
We have been gabbing. We can keep doing so. Are there any
gabbing? Does anybody have questions? I think there's a question box down here somewhere, but I haven't seen anything pop up. Well, let's keep.
We'll just keep going.
And tell me what I hate it when people ask me this, because I don't like to talk about things I'm working on, because you know, they can blow up in my face, and frequently do. But do you want to talk about what you're working on now, or no?
I will, for the same reason, I will be incredibly
Cagey?
oblique and yes, oblique about it. It's not presidents.
Okay.
I've done 3 presidents now, and when I say done, I mean I've written about them. I haven't actually done 3 presidents, because I don't even know how you'd. Who would even?
So much sagging, you know.
Right.
So. I'm super classy. Anyway.
Yeah. I think you can trust you and me, Julia, to elevate the tone of every conversation that we're in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've done 3 presidents, and I'm done doing presidents. So I'm going across the pond to Norfolk, and that's where I'm spending my time these days. Yeah. And that's all I'll say.
You can go
Norfolk, England. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so jealous of you. Maybe that's what
I haven't actually gone. That's the thing. It's what we were talking about before. I'm not actually there, and part of me thinks I should be. I want to see what the cliffs look like, and then part of me thinks, I didn't go to. I wrote a book called Roosevelt's Beast about Teddy Roosevelt in the jungle of Brazil, the Amazonian jungle. I didn't go down it.
No, well, that
because they're bugs. They're bugs. They're bugs.
The bugs, and the things in the water. The woman who wrote Seabiscuit never left her house. She did all.
Oh, it's true. She lives in DC as well, Laura Hillenbrand.
Oh, yeah.
True.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but
she never got on a horse. No siree.
She's never ridden a horse in her life. That part I didn't know.
Well, I assume, because I assume she didn't leave her house unless they brought the horse into the house.
Well, it's easy for a horse to go upstairs. I grew up on a horse farm, but they have a hard time coming down the stairs. So just so you know, over poor Jackie again.
I did. Is she okay? She's okay.
She's okay. Not a hair out of place. So.
By the way, can I just rave about the cover? This is written by designed by this gifted artist named Sarah Singh. And it's just so gorgeous.
They give you a copy of it, because you can see I've got my first book up there. They gave me a big poster of it. And then my second book, which came out on January 6, 2021, I got nothing. But
I'm sure the poster's in the mail.
I'll talk to Betsy about that. But it is such a great cover.
I think it's one of those things that kind of grabs you from. I can brag on it because it's not mine, but it's one of those things that just grabs you from afar. I love it. I love the lipstick thing. I even love the ampersand. This is my first book title with an "and" in it, and I thought it'd be naively. I assumed it would be "and," but in fact, the ampersand. The ampersand is a better choice when scrawled in lipstick across a white field. It's a better choice.
It's a much better choice.
Just word to the wise for people out there. If you're thinking about
Exactly. Deciding book
and
cover.
versus ampersand, yeah, go
But
with
it's
the
so
ampersand.
great when they get what your story is and like what it should be like. Like the woman who designed my books too, I just love her so much. I can hardly stand it.
Yeah,
And
I'm looking at Be Frank with Me, and I completely so love that book
the
cover.
picture,
Yeah.
the cover on that, I went to, her name's Mumtaz Mustafa, and this is in the before times when you could go to New York, and
Yeah.
I have to go talk to her. So I went to her desk and I said, and I'm sure I overwhelmed her because I'm like a little effervescent. I was like, oh my God, I love this so much. Did you like have a shot done, like do a shoot for this? And she said, no, it's clip art. And I was like, no way. So she said, yeah, what I did was I gave them 5 possibilities. One was fantastic, which is the one they used, and the others weren't. And I was like, you
That's
are
the
a
way.
genius.
The other ones suck. Yeah.
Yeah, because she wanted to make sure they picked the right one. And she did the second book too, which is also, because the second book, my historical novel, is set on a divorce ranch outside of Reno in the 1930s.
Very women. Very
Yeah.
the women.
The women, because the woman who wrote the women went to a divorce ranch to get her divorce, so she could.
Claire Booth. Yeah.
Claire Booth. She was married to a guy named Mr. Claire Booth. Yeah, her name was Claire Brokaw. She married a Mr. Booth or something.
And then a Mr. Luce.
And the first guy was a drunk but rich, so she ditched him to marry Henry Luce. So she went to a divorce ranch and wrote a play about it. Blah blah.
I love that whole
Oh my God. So
L'amour.
But they, I just kept saying to him, not too cowboy, not too cowboy. I don't want it to, I don't want him to think it's Louis L'Amour. So they, and she got the perfect, I wanted it to be more summer campy. So.
Well, my previous books, and I don't have them stacked up in an artful way, but the previous books were mostly just like men in 19th century clothes and a top hat looking away from the reader. Once there was a woman in a 19th century garb looking away from readers. So it could almost be folded into the same cover. So this was such a striking departure that because I think Betsy is listening, I will admit that the first time I saw it, I saw an earlier version of it, I was like, are you sure this doesn't seem me? Because it's so delightfully frontal and feminine. And I was just like, okay. But now, of course, I bow to the wisdom of
no, it's
others.
great. And I actually squealed when they sent me one. I was like, oh my God, this is a great cover. Carolyn Peck has a question. She missed what was the inspiration part, because we're not going to make you do that again. But was there ever a different title?
Actually, it's funny because my working title was kind of like Jackie and Lem. I never had kind of some Great Gatsby sort of title, Remains of the Day kind of title that we always loved, the poetic thing. It was always like, Jackie and Lem. And then I think it became Jackie and Me because nobody would know who Lem was. But I think that's kind of all weird. And I didn't have any other ideas. And I feel like just as Jackie needs to be on the cover, she needs to be in the title, because I think that's what people come for. They want their Jackie.
They come for the Jackie, they stay for the Lem. Because Lem is so delightful. Oh my God, I just wanted to be friends with him so bad. I could hardly stand it.
And I think Julia, you and I would have been friends with him. I think he would have been a hoot. I think we'd have had a grand old time with Lem at some party if we'd been invited to Hyannisport, which.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe we could just pretend that we're fancy or something.
That's right. Or just, or just bust it in with guns or something like that.
We could be the help.
They had a lot of help. Yes, they had a lot of help, the Kennedys. There was a lot of help. So.
Yeah. See, well, you got a big house. Well, Chris used to work on a show called News Radio, and this is such a non sequitur, but the woman who started it was named Mara Tierney, and her dog was a pug named Rose Kennedy, and she drove around town with Rose Kennedy, the dog, draped around her shoulders all the time. So whenever I come across the name Rose Kennedy, I always think of the pug, not of Rose Kennedy, her own self. So
what's funny, because I talked about being agnostic about the Kennedys, but once having researched them, I will say Rose to me was the biggest horror of them all. I thought she was horrifying.
Why so?
Pious, rigid, judgmental, cold. Never hugged her children, just kind of never visited Jack when he was in hospitals or anything like that. Yeah.
Do you think she got that way because she was always that way, or because Joe was?
I don't know. I mean, I think she was deified because she'd gone through so much loss, right? And we deify any mother, or we respect any mother who's lost children the way that she has. But no,
Mhm.
she was not a warm woman, and of course, fiercely Catholic, and fiercely condemning. The Kennedy I loved was Kathleen Kennedy. She was
Mhm.
Jack's sister who died in a plane crash. And Rose considered that she deserved to die because she was then mistress of a married man at the time. So God had ordained her death, and that's the kind of
He had
vengeful Christianity that I don't go in for.
yeah, no, yeah,
But
don't like
Kick would have been a kick.
we would
Kick
have
in the
liked her. We would have hung out with her too.
Oh, we totally would have hung out with Kick. Totally fun. Yeah.
It's so interesting. There's so many of them. You're going to get basically
There's
every
so
person.
many, and I lose track of them. I still struggle with Jean versus Pat. Jean versus Pat. Yeah, there are a couple of Kennedy sisters I still struggle with. Eunice, I know. Anyway, there are a lot of them. There are a lot.
Married Peter Lawford. Was that Pat?
Peter Lawford, yeah, married Pat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Chris, oh, I should also say, we have time. One of the things Lem did after Jack and Bobby's death was he became a kind of surrogate father to the next generation of Kennedys,
Mhm.
particularly Bobby Jr.
Mhm.
And Chris Lawford, and I think Tim Shriver. And his whole goal was to kind of raise the next generation of leaders. And ironically, given what we now know, he thought Bobby Jr. was the one who was going to be the next great leader, you know, and devoted a lot of energy to bringing him along and educating him about the Kennedy legacy. In fact, Bobby Jr. inherited Lem's house when Lem died.
Really?
Yeah,
Was it an
yeah.
apartment? Where was it?
It was a house up on the Upper East Side.
It was like a
And
townhouse.
townhouse, yeah.
Dang,
Yeah.
we really should have been friends with him because maybe he would have left it to us. That would have been really nice
Right,
to have.
right,
So
right.
yeah,
Yeah. But I think if we weren't Kennedys, I'm not sure we would have gotten it. I think
probably not.
yeah.
Did he keep it or did he sell it? This
I'm
is
not sure what he did with it. I do know that he named his son Michael. Michael's middle name was Lemoyne. Michael was the one who died in the ski accident, I think.
oh yeah, I remember that. That was very sad.
Yeah.
So
So
they had a hard road to hoe, that family. So
yeah,
but
yeah.
some of them had it coming. So wait,
Yes.
was Rose rich when Joe married her or no?
No, she was well off. She was what they call lace curtain Irish in Boston.
Okay.
So her dad was no, definitely money. She was sent to private Catholic schools and probably warped by a lot of nuns, you know, during those days. So yeah, in fact, I think she was considered a step up for Joe, because Joe's dad was a saloon keeper, although very, very active in Boston politics. It's that whole crazy Boston world. There's a great novel called The Last Hurrah, which was made into a movie years ago with Spencer Tracy and all this stuff. So all those guys, Honey Fitz, that was Rose's father. It's a wonderful tribal dynasty.
What are you reading these days?
What am I reading? I'm always about the research. So I just read this book. This will show you what time period I'm working in. It's called the Go-Between. It was now I'm blanking on his name. It was a British novel. It's about this boy circa turn of the century Norfolk, who is tasked to be a go-between between this very high-born woman and this kind of working class farmer, and all the things that go wrong when that happens. It's a beautifully written book, and it's killing me that I can't remember the author's name. But somebody is either looking at it or I can surreptitiously without anyone knowing.
Kevin can look it up, I bet. Kevin knows everything.
Yeah. Does Kevin know everything? Wait, do not write it. I just got this. Oh, no, I didn't just get it from Betsy. It's like my editor, do not write a dystopian novel, please. And I will not.
No, because it's time for that. Because I used to love dystopian novels. Like I thought if you could do a funny dystopian novel, that would be like totally my sweet spot. But now I'm like, you know what? I'm not interested in them anymore because living them has not.
Because we're living it. We're living it. We don't need to imagine. Yeah,
that's why we thought it was going to be. So
yeah, my son wants me to watch we were our family show, and this is scary. Was the Walking Dead for a while. But I kind of parachuted out after a while because the violence was just so cyclical and repetitive but he keeps trying to draw me back. It's like, no, I don't want to see people being awful to each other because
No.
this is what we're living.
You know what I just read that was hilarious? Like I laughed out loud several times. It's called This Is Gonna Hurt. And it's they've made it into a series too. It's very funny. I'm just saying.
This is going to hurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that Go-Between book by L.P. Hartley?
Yes, it is. L.P.
Yeah,
Hartley.
the New York Review Books Classic. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
it looks
I'm
great.
gonna write it down.
This is when you get to my age, you will be going, what, that thing by the guy that you did.
Yeah, oh my God. With the brown hair, that guy. You know?
Well, thank you.
And the glasses and the
Exactly.
and the collared shirt. Yes.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you
for this talk. It was great. And here's the book again, Jackie and Me. I just put the link to it in the chat. If you want to click on that, that would be great. You know, order it from us.
It's
here
so
at Powell. Julia, thanks so much for joining us. It was a delight to meet you. This is Julia's newest book in paperback. Just came out in January, right? The hardcover came out. We were talking about how the hardcover
January
came
6th.
out.
That was
January.
my launch date was January 6th, 2021. Lucky me. So
the timing of it all.
Thank you for letting us talk to each other. This was so much fun. I don't know if anybody else enjoyed it as much as we did.
We always have a good time together.
Yes,
so we have no idea if anybody else is, but we do.
Yeah. And then also I was going to mention that these events are recorded and people can watch them on our YouTube channel. This one will probably be popping up sometime tomorrow. I just put a link to our YouTube channel in the chat there. So click on that. And you'll be ready to watch this again tomorrow. Share it with your friends and family. You can see all of the other Zoom talks that we've done on that page too. Lots of really great conversations the past couple of years here. So once again, thanks Julia, thanks Louis, thanks everyone at home for watching, and have a great night.
Oh, thanks for having us. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.